Hello and welcome or welcome back to another episode of Shoulders Down. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Leah. I'm an intuitive eating dietitian and body image coach. And here on the podcast, my goal is to help support you on your journey to making peace with food so that it doesn't have to take up so much of your precious mental real estate and so that you can live your damn life without feeling so burdened by thinking about calories and food and body image all the time. Today on the podcast, I am bringing you a post-trail edition episode where we're going to talk about 6 lessons that the Appalachian Trail taught me about intuitive eating. For some backstory, every summer, two friends and I have been hiking a section of the Appalachian Trail, which, if you're not familiar, the Appalachian Trail goes from Georgia all the way to Maine, so basically the whole length of the East Coast. And I believe it's like 2,100 miles, maybe a little more than that. And so two of my best friends and I met in college on a hiking trip, and that was like my first exposure to backpacking. I want to say I fell in love with it, but I'm also still terrified of backpacking and have such like a complex relationship with backpacking. But they say it's like type 2 fun where you're having fun, but you're also it's hard and scary. Ever since that freshman year orientation trip, I just kind of became obsessed with long distance hiking and more recently, specifically the Appalachian Trail. So these two friends and I have been doing sections of the Appalachian Trail for the past few years. So I think we've done like close to 400 miles at this point or something. And this past summer, we just did 100 miles. And that was through a piece of the trail in Maine. We have like a little bit over 100 miles left in Maine until we finish that state. And we're just going to kind of keep plucking away, section hiking each summer until hopefully we do the whole thing one day. And while we were out there this year, it was a 10-day trip, 100 miles in 10 days. I started to think about how many lessons we could take from through hiking or section hiking that are applicable to an intuitive eating journey as well, because this is how my brain works. I'm always thinking about you and your journey with food and body and how I can make these metaphors because that's how my brain is always like seeing the world through that lens. So that inspired this episode, 6 lessons that the Appalachian Trail taught me about intuitive eating. So we'll just dive right in. And I also want to say, whether or not you've ever set foot on a trail, these lessons can help you build a more peaceful relationship with food, body, and movement. So even if you're not a hiker, it's okay. These lessons are things that my experience hiking on the trail helped me reflect on, and they're things that can be translated into a intuitive eating and body image journey as well. So the first thing that I think we can take from hiking, long distance hiking, is that if you don't listen to your body's whispers, they'll become screams. So, in the context of hiking on the trail, you're hiking for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And if you have a little cue from your body, whether that's like a slight hint of dehydration or like the early signs of a headache or a hot spot on your foot, which could be the beginning signs of a blister, if you don't listen to that quote unquote whisper, that little teeny nudge from your body of like, hey, something's not feeling right now, if you don't take the time to pay attention to that, then it's gonna get worse. And that's what I mean by it's gonna start to scream at you. If you don't tend to that little hot spot on your foot, it can start to be a blister that is so painful that you can't even walk without wincing. If you don't heed to those early signs of maybe getting a headache or feeling a little dehydrated by starting to drink something or having some electrolytes, then it can become much more serious and much more unpleasant and painful in the case of like a really bad headache or, a more extreme case, getting really dehydrated, getting muscle cramps, those kinds of things. We can take this lesson and translate it to intuitive eating. In the intuitive eating world, we learn that it's not helpful to push past your body's cues. It's not helpful to ignore hunger cues. This can lead to binging or feeling really tired and burnt out. And so, if we don't listen to those early signs, if we don't listen to those early signs of hunger, it's going to bite you in the butt later on. And that might look like when you finally do eat, eating past comfortable fullness. It might look like, come the weekend, being like, oh my God, I've been deprived all week. Screw it. I'm gonna just binge and be bad. And that isn't great either. So if we don't listen to our body's cues, whether that's for hunger or fullness, it can become more loud and more in our face and more unpleasant. So I'll say it one more time. If you don't listen to your body's whispers, they'll become screams. If you don't take into account the little messages that your body's giving you, and this isn't just like with food, it's like emotions too. If you're feeling an emotion, you're trying to shove it down and try and shove it down, it's often going to come back with vengeance and because it's trying to get a need met, it's trying to communicate with you. And it's like a little kid who's like, "Hey, mom, I need something." And suddenly they're like, "Mom, mom." They're just going to keep raising their voice until they get their need met. So that's the first lesson that the Appalachian Trail can teach us that can be translated into intuitive eating. The second lesson is that hard work is rewarding. Hiking is hard. It is sweaty and unpleasant sometimes. You're not showering every day, or you're going multiple days in a row without showering or without having like fresh food, and it can be physically really difficult. However, it can be so rewarding when you feel the accomplishment of getting to camp for the day, or when you're at the top of a gorgeous mountain and you have the most incredible, breathtaking views, or when you jump into an alpine lake and you go skinny dipping and you just feel the water on your body. It can be so rewarding, but the hard part is intertwined with the rewarding parts. Like you can't have the rewarding parts, you can't have that feeling of accomplishment at the end of a day of hiking without also having that feeling of, oh my God, this is so hard. I'm sweating, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm cranky. So they're so intertwined. And with intuitive eating is hard. And in many ways, it can be harder than dieting, especially at the beginning. Because if you're someone who's been following food rules for years or even decades, to go from using those types of rules of like, this is how much you're supposed to eat, this is what time of day you're supposed to eat, this is the right portion size or point number or calorie number. If you go from that to listen to your body, like that is so hard and confusing. It's so hard to know, what does that mean? What is my body saying? Oh no, what if I can't trust my body? And it can also be hard to unlearn so many old ways of relating to food, of seeing certain foods as good and certain foods as bad, and even certain bodies as good and certain bodies as bad. Seeing certain foods as ones that, you need to eat every day, and other foods as ones that you shouldn't eat as often. Like all of the baggage that can come with years and years of conditioning and diet culture, it can be really hard to build new neural pathways and to unlearn those ideas that you've held with you for so long. But the peace and the freedom that comes from intuitive eating can make it all worthwhile. So yes, it's hard. In many ways, it's hard in the sense that it's such deeper work and it brings up a lot of emotions and feelings from the past and really vulnerable feelings of shame and grief associated with body image. It is hard shit. And it is so rewarding. I've seen this personally, my own intuitive eating journey. I've seen this in the work that I've gotten to do with hundreds of clients at this point. It is so beautiful to see the ripple effects of how food freedom and body peace changes lives. Like it really can free up mental real estate so you have the time and energy to focus on your loved ones and your passions and your hobbies. And so you can be present with your kids or whatever, whoever you're being present with. It can help be more social and have more connections because you're not worried about like, oh no, if I go to this social gathering, am I going to eat really bad? And should I not go just to avoid that? It helps your confidence and your sense of finding pleasure and satisfaction and joy in life and your overall sense of life satisfaction. The freedom and the peace and the joy that comes with this work makes the really hard, deep, uncomfortable work worthwhile. Just like the climbing and the sweating and the stinky body odor and the lack of access to different varieties of food and the bug bites. All of those things often are made worthwhile by the beauty and the feeling of accomplishment that comes from hiking. Oh, one other thing I want to add while we're on this is something else that's hard about intuitive eating, beyond unlearning old pathways and shifting the way you relate to food. It's also hard to grieve the thin ideal and challenge systemic fat phobia and weight stigma that exists in our culture. This is beyond challenging work. And again, it is so worthwhile when you see all of the peace and freedom that's on the other side. The next thing that the Appalachian Trail can teach us about intuitive eating is fed is best. When you are hiking on a long distance hiking trip, there's not as many options for food. Every meal might not be exactly what you're craving. It might just be the food you have left in your food bag before you go into town and do a resupply. But what's most important is getting fuel in. Not every meal needs to be this like life-changing, satisfying eating experience. That's just not realistic. Of course, it's great to prioritize satisfaction when possible, but what's more important is feeding yourself consistently. So getting food in, it doesn't matter, just fueling yourself. And every single food has something to offer. There's no such thing as empty calories. So things that might traditionally be considered empty calories, like candy, for example, can be incredibly helpful on the trail. It gives you quick, accessible energy that you can tap into immediately to keep hiking. And it's not good or bad, it's just another form of fuel. So, what is important to take away is that satisfaction matters, but sometimes adequacy has to come first. So, we don't need to obsess over every single meal, whether you're in the woods or at home or at work or whatever. At the end of the day, sometimes eating is more mechanical and just about continuing to nourish yourself, and it doesn't have to be like a life-changing gourmet food experience every single time. Not realistic. Okay, this next one is my favorite one, and it comes with a really nice anecdote. The fourth lesson that I learned from long distance hiking the Appalachian Trail that can be translated to a lesson about intuitive eating is that healthy is relative. In diet culture, we often get this really one size fits all definition of health. Something like, health is about eating nutrient-dense foods and making your body as small as possible and exercising every day. Often the definition of health is very rigid and very much about diet and exercise. If you've ever heard, it's as simple as diet and exercise, that kind of thing is often very characteristic of diet culture's definition of health. But health is relative. So when I do this kind of work with clients and we think about like, what does health mean to you? When it comes down to it, health is really about doing what's best for your body in the moment. And that can look different for different people at different times. And, different clients have different definitions of health. But in general, what actually makes up our health outcomes from a evidence-based perspective, there's so many more things than just diet and exercise. And if we run with this idea of like, what if health is about doing what's best for your body in the moment, then something like kale, which would be considered quote unquote healthy by diet culture standards, is not healthy on trail because it's not energy dense. You wouldn't be getting the most bang for your buck if you were carrying fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing because they're not very energy dense. And when you're hiking, you burn through so much energy that you need really energy dense sources of food. Otherwise, it's not worth the weight of carrying it. You won't make it out of the woods if you're trying to subsist on like kale or quinoa. You need calorie-rich foods. And I want to tell an example of this story. So this year on our section hike, we met a guy who was through hiking. So through hiking means you started in Georgia or you started in Maine and you're heading all the way north or all the way south. You're doing the whole 2,100 miles in one calendar year in one continuous footpath. So we don't do that. We section hike, which means we do a piece and then the next summer we get back on the trail where we left off and we do the next piece. But this year we met a bunch of through hikers because the timing of the trail, we were in Maine, which is pretty close to the end. So we met a lot of people going northbound who only had a little bit of time left, maybe like 200 miles or something until they reached the very end. And we would talk to them and get to know them. And in particular, we met this one guy who was through hiking from Georgia. He had made it all the way to Maine from Georgia, and we were sharing a campsite area with him one night. And we got to talking, and there's this moment where we were sitting around eating our dinner, and he joined us and was sitting near us eating his dinner. And as we're talking to him, he's peeling back the plastic on a Kraft single slice of cheese and then shoving it into his mouth, and then ripping back the plastic on another one and then shoving it into his mouth. And he just kept going like a well-oiled machine in one swift motion. And later, my friends and I were talking, and my friend B said she lost count after seven. He was absolutely downing Kraft singles. And this guy told us after we were like, oh my God, that was kind of crazy. Like, what was going on there? He told us that he had been really trying to figure out his food situation because he'd been hiking for a few months. And he said that he got it dialed in to just four foods. He was eating just Kraft singles, beef jerky, Snickers, and honey buns. Honey buns are like a kind of packaged food, like donut type food. And this guy had been hiking an average of 20 miles a day through absolutely grueling terrain. The terrain in Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont and those northern states in New England is very, very difficult. It's known to be the harder part of the trail. And he said he was feeling great. His energy was stable throughout the day. He was making big miles. He was feeling good in terms of his digestive system. He was having regular bowel movements. He said that this diet provided him everything he needed. He was getting fat and electrolytes from the salt and the fat from the cheese. He was also getting protein, a little protein from the Snickers, and even more protein from the jerky, some more fat from the nuts in the Snickers, and of course, carbs from the sugar in the Snickers, and a bunch of carbs from the honey buns. So he felt like he had everything dialed in terms of hitting all the nutrients he needed to fuel his hike. The reason I bring this story up is because if somebody told you that all they ate was beef jerky, honey buns, Snickers, and Kraft singles, you would probably think they're unhealthy. And by diet culture's version of health, by that definition, they would be because those are mostly processed foods and there's not enough variety and they're not eating enough fruits and vegetables or any fruits and vegetables. But again, health is about so much more. Think of this guy, if we think of a pie chart of all the things that make up our health outcomes. Again, if you visualize diet culture's version of that pie chart is, oh, it's just half diet, half exercise. But really, there's so many other factors, and I'm going to link in the show notes a link to a visual of the different factors that actually make up health outcomes that's on a post on my blog. So you can click that link in the show notes if you want to see a visual of this. But in general, there's things like the social determinants of health, genetics, stress levels, trauma, age. There's so many more factors that go into a person's health outcomes besides from just diet and exercise. And so if we take this guy as a little case study example, think about it. He was getting so much movement, right? Spending all day moving. He was spending a ton of time outdoors, getting fresh air and vitamin D. His stress levels were probably relatively low because his only responsibilities every day were to walk or hike, set up camp, tend to his basic needs, food, water, shelter, etc., and then do the same thing the next day, probably free from most like work stress and other dynamics because he was so in this experience in nature for the last several months. And it's also known that social determinants of health make up a significant portion of our health outcomes, as I mentioned. And one of the social determinants of health is social and community context. So basically, like the strength of our community and relationships. And the Appalachian Trail is known for its incredible community, like unmatched to any other long distance hiking trail. Though most people hike alone during the days, I mean, some people meet friends and hike in little groups that they call tramilies, like your trail family. At night, there's a big sense of camaraderie at the shelters and the campsites and in the towns when you're off getting resupply and staying at a hostel. And so there really is this sense of everyone supporting each other and encouraging each other. And if that's the case, right, this guy, by the way, his name is Roadrunner. That's his trail name. On long distance hiking trails, often people get given like a trail name and then they go by that name in the woods. So this guy's name was Roadrunner. So Roadrunner, even though his diet was consisting of things that would conventionally be considered unhealthy, we have to look at the whole picture. Like, again, here's a guy who's probably experiencing relatively low stress levels, spending a ton of time in nature and doing something meaningful, having a great community while doing it, getting a ton of movement. There's so much else that was going on. He could have very well be perfectly healthy, and he probably was because he was feeling really good and really strong and energized, even doing 20-mile days back to back to back to back in grueling terrain. So, what I hope you can take from this is that diet culture slash wellness culture wants us to think that food is everything when it comes to health, but it's actually a much smaller factor than we've been led to believe. And I also want to add to this, it's not only a smaller factor when it comes to health, but it's also a smaller factor in determining body size than we've been led to believe. Genetics play a huge role in body size, and just as a little side tangent example, I hike the trail with two of my best friends every summer. We hike the same amount, we eat the same amount, so our movement and food intake is pretty similar. We pack the same foods, we all have different rations of the same foods. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of variation in like different flavors of whatever, but it's pretty similar. And our bodies look different. We have different fat distribution and different bone structures, and therefore our bodies are looking different. And if body size was purely about diet and exercise, then like, theoretically we're hiking the same amount, eating the same amount, the same kinds of foods. Our bodies should like start to look more the same, but that's just never going to happen because genetics, genetic blueprint, bone structure, and so many other factors beyond our control. So this is all under the fourth lesson, which is health is relative. It's so personal and it's about so much more than diet and exercise. The fifth lesson that the Appalachian Trail can teach us about intuitive eating is sometimes we have to rely on logic over intuition. So on the trail, sometimes you don't feel hungry. Like for us, it would especially happen in the morning. You wake up super early to start hiking. Sometimes you're not hungry at that early hour. Sometimes you're a little anxious or nervous or even excited about the day ahead, if it's a big mile day or a day where you're summiting a big mountain. And that anxiety or excitement can be an attunement disruptor and interrupt your body's ability to feel your hunger cues. But even if you're not hungry, it's still important to eat from a place of logic because you have to know, okay, I can't trust my intuitive cues right now because my body still needs fuel. And one of the official definitions of intuitive eating is a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and logic. So instinct, the obvious one, I'm feeling hungry, let me eat. Emotion is like, oh, I'm not hungry, but I don't know, I'm on vacation and everyone's getting ice cream and it'd feel fun to enjoy like the evening on vacation getting ice cream and feel connected to the group. So I'm gonna get ice cream. Eating from an emotional motivation, which is fine. Emotional eating gets a bad reputation, but it's totally fine. It's a way that we can connect with each other and be in community. And then the last piece of intuitive eating, so we have instinct, emotion, and logic. Logic is eating from a place of self-care, eating from a place of trying to sort of anticipate your needs. So that could look like, I have back-to-back meetings today, and I might not be hungry right now, but by the time I have another opening after my meetings are done, I'm going to be ravenous, way too hungry and uncomfortable. So let me eat something now, even though I'm not hungry. In the case of the hike, it could look like, I'm not that hungry right now, but it's really hot today. I'm probably feeling a little bit nauseated by the heat and the exertion, so I probably can't really trust the fact that I don't feel hungry. From a place of logic, let me eat because it's been a little while since I had a snack and I'm expending a lot of energy hiking, and I know it would probably help my body stay fueled if I continue putting fuel in and having snacks. So a lot of people think intuitive eating is just, eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not hungry. But sometimes we really have to rely on logic. And especially when we have things that are considered attunement disruptors. So whether that's anxiety or stress or extreme heat, or different, sometimes attunement disruptors can be in the form of being sleep deprived. Different things can impact our ability to accurately read our body's cues. And when you start to practice intuitive eating, you'll start to learn what those things are for you, and you'll start to get better at knowing when you can trust your cues and when they have to be sort of like verified with like two-factor authentication because you might have an attunement disruptor going on. And I want to add that this is especially true for people recovering from disordered eating or eating disorders. When you've been dieting or outsourcing your eating decisions to a set of rules and metrics for years or decades, your hunger cues can start to become a little unreliable because your body is so out of practice of listening to those cues, and it's just kind of continuously trying to push them aside and drown them out and instead listen to what your app says or how many points you have left in the day. And so when you're making the switch from outsourcing eating decisions to intuitive eating, it can require more of this logical eating or like mechanical eating, self-care eating. All these terms can describe this logic, practical approach to eating, which is a component of intuitive eating. So this lesson both applies on the trail. Sometimes we have to rely on logic over intuition, and it absolutely applies to everyday life when you're trying to move away from disordered eating and towards intuitive eating. Number six, the sixth lesson that hiking on the Appalachian Trail taught me about intuitive eating that I want to share with you is that fear, doubt, and even tears are part of the journey, both with long distance hiking and intuitive eating. It's not all butterflies and rainbows. With hiking, there are really hard moments, bug bites, falls, blisters, sore feet, and just utter exhaustion. On an intuitive eating journey, there are also really hard parts, coming to terms with difficult core beliefs, challenging deeply ingrained ways of thinking, reconciling ways in which you've been living out of alignment with your values, grappling with systemic weight stigma. There are so many hard parts. And these hard parts are normal and to be expected. Both hiking and divesting from diet culture, becoming an intuitive eater, are really meaningful journeys that come with incredible wins, beautiful realizations, and immense joy, alongside some tears and grief as well. You can have a full-blown meltdown halfway up a mountain and still call the day a success. You're not failing if it's hard. The same is true for intuitive eating. You can feel really sad and feel like it's really hard and heavy, and it can still be a success. You can still be moving forward and progressing along your journey. By the way, I had many full-blown meltdowns halfway up a mountain this summer, and I would still call the day a success because both things can be true. More than one reality can exist at once. So remember, fear, doubt, tears, big emotions are part of the journey. You're not doing it wrong. You're not failing at intuitive eating or your body image journey if it feels hard and challenging. So there you have it. Those are six lessons that the Appalachian Trail taught me this summer about intuitive eating. I hope you'll take those with you and pull something meaningful from one of them or all of them. And if you made it this far, I'm so glad you're here and listening. I want to remind you that I have an amazing free resource for you. If you haven't already downloaded it, head to the link in the show notes and download our free intuitive eating starter kit. This is a beautiful Notion dashboard with a podcast playlist that I recommend starting with and listening to no matter where you are in your journey if you just want to make sure that you have all the basics covered. It includes a mini ebook that I wrote all about intuitive eating, and it includes a hunger fullness scale and activity on how to use it, along with a couple other really cool resources. So you can head to the link in the show notes and download that free intuitive eating starter kit, and it will come right to your inbox. That is all for today's episode. I will see you for our next episode. And until then, I hope that you are feeling inspired and feeling supported on your intuitive eating and body image journey. If you need anything, you can always email me and I can share options for support at leah@leahcarnardi.com. All right, I'll see you in the next episode.